everyone. Welcome to Sidewalk, Skyline podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Rogers. And today I'm having a conversation with Peter Ochs and Steve Fox. We're going to have a conversation in particular about some of the work that Peter is doing in the American prison system. Peter is a lifelong, faith-driven entrepreneur. His 30-year journey has been dedicated to building prosperous businesses God's way. Pete's life mission is to inspire and equip business leaders worldwide to live with a purpose greater than themselves, leveraging their businesses to make a Christ-centered impact in the world. And he's the author of High Impact Life and High Impact Business. And Peter is a friend of a friend. My friend, Steve Fox, and I, we've got to be at least 35 years of friendship. And for 30 of those years, he's been a veteran of New Song Church, where I pastor in Windsor, up until recently when Steve and his wife, Victoria, moved 2 hours away. We don't get to see them as often as we once did. And that's sad, but we're excited for what they're doing with their lives as well. Anyways, I'm going to just say this about Steve. Steve, initially, I had asked him if he would consider being part of this new church that was starting. Back, I contacted him in 1993, and he and Victoria prayed about it and said, "Tell you what, we'll commit for 6 months and see how it goes." Well, they just kept renewing their membership for about 60 of those 6-month stretches. So, welcome aboard, Steve. And Steve, maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you and Peter know each other and the way that your lives intersect.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, life is a great adventure. The last 66-month periods of time, being a part of New Song Church was a great adventure. I don't imagine that adventure is over, but we've started new adventures. And part of that was an introduction to Pete through another mutual friend, Jonathan, who lives on the east coast of Canada. So with the internet and the way business goes today, it's not hard to get introduced to new people. And if you like being introduced to new people and stretching yourself, then I probably fit that bill well. So I have spent a limited amount of time with Pete, but I had an opportunity to hear Pete's story first of all, and it was just utterly captivating. I really appreciated and enjoyed. In fact, I enjoyed it enough that I went on to Amazon and bought his book. And I'm partway through his book. This is the shameless plug for your book, Pete.
All right, I'll put it in the show notes.
I'll send you the commission check.
12 cents.
But I think one of the things that really captivated me, and I'm not going to take anything away from Pete's story at all, but I think one of the things that really captivated me about listening to Pete's story right at the beginning was that he was very entrepreneurial, and I could relate to that. And then he had this keen desire to serve the kingdom of God through his business. And man, I just melted at that.
He told me like you, Steve. Sounds like when I met you, you were already in that wheelhouse.
Yeah, absolutely. But what Pete has done, both through what he has told me through the brief times that we have met, and also through his book, is that he ran into some brick walls along the way and then figured out how to get beyond them to really serve in the best possible capacity that he could in serving the kingdom. And so I just thought it was an absolute perfect fit to introduce him to you, Kevin. And I am thrilled that he's here and able to share his story with us.
Yeah. Now you're in Orlando today,
I am.
and yeah, you're at a Kingdom Advisors conference.
I am.
And Peter, tell us about your home.
Yeah, I live in Wichita, Kansas. It is a sunny day, 6 degrees with 12 inches of snow on the ground. So it's supposed to be 50 or 55 here today, but we're suffering through.
Yeah, and you, Peter, I read on your website that you identified four life principles that you go by, and honor God, serve people, pursue excellence, and steward capital. Um, these principles, tell us about your life journey and how are those four principles shaped in you? Uh, Unfortunately, this is the first time you and I get to have met, so I'm curious about your background, where you came from, and how God was at work to forge those principles into your ethos.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Kevin, thanks for having me on, and Steve, thanks for making the great connection here. I appreciate that and feel honored to be here. So, yeah, bottom line, I'm the son of a farmer and a school teacher, a Kansas farmer and a Kansas school teacher. And they taught me two things. My dad taught me hard work, and my mom taught me how to study. And and those two habits um, have treated me well over the years. So, yeah, grew up Kansas farm kid, came to Christ at 12 years of age, and that was a big thing for me. I didn't quite really understand what that meant. Went to college at Kansas University, and I think while I made God Savior of my life at 12, I probably made him Lord of my life when I was 20. And maybe I really didn't understand who he was until I was in college. But that that was a very transformational time for me. Uh, my mom really kind of wanted me to become a medical doctor, and I didn't like that idea. But I thought the closest thing to it that I could do would be a dentist. So I spent 2 years studying pre-med and was going to be an orthodontist. I took I had a little time in my schedule my junior year, fall of my junior year actually. So I took a finance class, and I took that because I needed to. I thought this would be great. I could figure out how I was going to invest all the money I was going to make as an orthodontist. And about two weeks into that class, I figured out I'm not a orthodontist. I'm a business guy. And when I really got to thinking about it, I really came to the conclusion I don't think anybody wants these farmer hands in their mouth anyway. And so this was probably a good idea for anybody who would have been a future patient. So I changed majors, got out, came to Wichita, Kansas, and got in the commercial banking business, and really enjoyed that. I did that for 8 years. I will tell you, in the middle of that run, at the age of 25, I did two things that were very impactful. And I really encourage young people to do this. One of those is to write, start writing a life plan. So I wrote a little mission statement. I put some values down. I put some big, hairy, audacious goals down, things I wanted to tackle. And then I put a few things in there about, being a better Christian and more disciplined and so on and so forth. One of the things I did put in there was I wanted to be an entrepreneur by the time I was 30. So I came out of this farming background. I liked the commercial banking business, but it was pretty stodgy. And anyway, at the age of 29, every year I wrote a personal plan after that. So, number one, write a personal plan. Number two is I'd read a book that said you need a mentor. So I went looking for two mentors. And everybody I asked in town, I said, who are the two best Christian businessmen in town? And those two names continued to pop up. So I figured out who they were. I got their phone numbers. I called both of them, took them to lunch, and said, "Would you mentor me?" Both of them agreed. I will tell you, One of those men spent 40 years with me, and the other spent 45 years with me, mentoring me. They passed away a few years ago. Uh, 10 years ago, when one moved from his home to an assisted living center, we had our monthly meeting. And every time we would meet, he had a Franklin planner. If you remember those
Yeah.
little leather bound things you write in, right? Every time we were meeting, he was writing, scribbling in this Franklin planner. So we had lunch this one day, and he said, "Well, I'm cleaning out my house and whatever, and I want you to have this." And he slid across the table a plastic box that was about this big and about that thick. Inside that was every note that he had taken for 35 years when we were at lunch.
Wow.
I didn't do it for myself, but he did it for me. I just, I sat there and wept. Should I start business? Praying for my wife who's having problems with pregnancy. Pete, you need to lose weight. Pete, you need to work out. All these things that he mentored me for 40 years. So I will tell you, um, I believe you need to have several older mentors. I believe it's great to have a peer mentor or two. My best friend is about my age and he's my peer mentor. My two older guys have passed away. And I believe you ought to have a couple of younger mentors. The old mentors give you a look at history. The peer mentor gives you a real-time look at life. And the young guys keep me fired up because they're visioning the future and I'm seeing the future in them. So I really would encourage people to do that. So um, long story short, started my business at the age of 30. The first 2 or 3 years were tough. I took a 75% pay cut. I went from working 9 to 5 in the banking business to 5 to 9 being an entrepreneur. Um, Things got better in year 2 or 3. I will tell you that my wife came to me after about 2 years and said, "Time out, you need to stop this." I was literally working 7 days a week, 8, 10 hours a day. I'd go to church with my family and then come home and work. And uh, uh, I agreed not to work on Sundays and only work a half a day on Saturday. And guess what happened to my business in about 30 days? It took off. And you see, I was violating scripture. And that was a big lesson for me. Fast forward through my 30s. It was interesting when I started my business. Let me get back to your original question here. Where'd those four values come from? I had a good friend who owned a business, and he took me to his business. And when I walked in the front door, on the front wall there were 8 words: honor God, serve people, pursue excellence, steward profit or steward capital. And those, I walked in, I saw that, and a couple things hit me. One is just the sheer simplicity, but the power of those 8 words. Plus, I was astounded that anybody in business would put a thing on the wall that said, honor God. And I go, what's this all about? He took me upstairs and he talked to me about this. By the way, he's one of my best friends and my peer mentor today. Okay. And so I said, well, can I steal those? And he goes, that's great because I stole them from Service Master Corporation. If you're familiar with that company, Bill Pollard had those four values. And it's interesting because I've run into another number of companies now around the country who have just taken those four values on. If I get to why I like those four values, I think they are the antidote to a life that the world is calling us to live. If we go to if we go to 1 John 2:15 and 16, do not love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For everything in the world, the cravings of sinful man, possessions, the lust of his eyes, pleasure, and the boasting of what he has and does, pride comes not from the Father, but from the world. So I see pride, pleasure, and possessions. If you could just envision a triangle, and in that triangle are four other triangles, and there's one on each corner and one in the middle. If you put yourself in the middle of that, says me, the three triangles on the outside is pride, pleasure, and possession. That's what the world is calling us to. But if we want to live a surrendered life and not a successful life. The world's calling us to success. Jesus is calling us to surrender. The antidote to those four, with me in the center, pride, pleasure, and possessions, is God in the center. And then when I do that, it changes my passions. When my purpose is about me, it's about pride, pleasure, and possessions. When my purpose is to honor God, it's pride turns to service to others, pleasure turns to excellence for God, and possessions turns to stewardship. And so I think those are four very powerful words. And I've done my best to live by those, but I'm not quite there, but I'm working hard on it.
That's an excellent illustration. I was thinking, yeah, that's the unholy Trinity, and his name is Mammon.
Oh,
That we live our lives just thinking about ourselves,
yes.
and yeah, love what you're saying there, and I'm really it's profound that you had not one but two mentors for that length of time. When I talk to people about mentoring, oh yeah, so and so was my mentor for a year or 6 months or three
Yeah.
months, not 35 years.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I never made a major decision without asking them.
wow.
And they were so helpful. Back to the three P's for just a minute, pride, pleasure, and
Hmm.
possessions. If you think about it, that theme is throughout the entire Bible. You had Adam and Eve in the garden, held up the apple. They said, it tastes good, uh, pleasure or possessions. It is pleasing to the eye, pleasure, and it'll make me like God, pride.
Mm.
You go to Solomon, what'd he have? Pride, pleasure, and possessions. Richest
Hmm.
guy, a lot of concubines and a lot of stuff.
Hmm.
Jesus, when he came out of the 40 days, was tested with the three P's. Food, I'll give you all this, I'll make you like God. But I think those few little verses there in First John really powerful.
I feel a sermon series coming on. I might steal that.
I will jump in and tell you that on the long drive, because we drove from Canada down to Florida for the Kingdom Advisor Conference, my wife and I listened to Randy Alcorn's Money, Possessions, and Eternity. And then I got to spend some time with Randy Alcorn at the conference, which was wonderful. But and I discussed a couple of key ideas, and he spoke a lot on what we've already talked about right here. And I will tell you that one of the things that I treasure about Kingdom Advisors is the connection to Ron Blue, because Ron Blue and Larry Burkett were the absolute granddaddies of Christian financial advice and teaching biblical stewardship principles. And of course, this is what we're all speaking about that we want to adhere to. And so last evening, I caught Ron in the hall, and I'm doing some fun and interesting stuff individually with Ron. And I told him that, unbeknownst to him, he has been one of my mentors, because I include him in some of my mentors, long before we ever met. I read some of his books. I knew of his teachings, and he has been an incredible mentor to me in this whole field of biblical financial stewardship. And and so I had the opportunity last night to express my gratitude to him for what he had absolutely no idea he had done.
Yeah.
And that was a great opportunity.
Yeah.
For anybody listening, Steve has spent his adult life working as a financial advisor. And Steve, just in brief, what is Kingdom Advisors? You mentioned that that's the conference you're at.
Mhm. Yeah, Kingdom Advisors is for Christian financial advisors. Primarily, there are people who are accountants. There's a lot of other people who have taken a keen interest and become part of the organization. But Kingdom Advisors is really focused on how we can take all of these biblical principles that we learn and share them with the world. And so I'll take maybe just because you opened the door, Kevin, I'll take 2 minutes. Sorry, Pete.
No, no.
And I had a conversation in Toronto, I don't know, maybe 6, 8 months ago with Ron Blue. And he said, we now have recognition in the financial world in North America of the CKA, the Certified Kingdom Advisor designation. It's more recognized today in the US than a CFP, a Certified Financial Planner, which is considered the gold standard. And so it has a very high ethical bar. And of course, the whole purpose is not what we can get, but what we can give. And so Kingdom Advisors has grown substantially beyond the borders of the US where it started, and it has absorbed a lot of advisors in Canada. And this morning I had a meeting with some advisors from all over the world that are now joining and being a part of Kingdom Advisors. And KA is wanting to focus us intently on a lot of the things that Pete is about to tell us about what he's done in his business and where it can go in serving and adding to and financially supporting kingdom purposes. And so I've been so honored to be a part of that. And so in this conversation with Ron Blue some time ago in Toronto, he said, we have the recognition and RBI, Ron Blue Institute, has all of the educational content. But what we lack at this point in time is the army to take this to the church. And foolishly or not, I said, send me. I'll be glad to do that. How can we get started? And his eyes lit up. He's now 83 years old. He's been at this for 45 years. And his eyes lit up and said, I just need one person that will start this. And then we can build the model and then send it out through Kingdom Advisors around the world to go into the church to teach the church true biblical financial stewardship principles that will radically change their lives and hopefully in that endeavor completely change radically the church. So that's sort of where I come with Kingdom Advisors. And at this point in time, I think I'm probably headed down the road to a stewardship pastorship, but we shall see. Anyway, Pete, back to you.
Yeah.
First
Uh,
time, yeah,
Go ahead.
first time I heard your story, it was truly captivating. Because I grew up in New Song Church with Pastor Kevin, we have this deep desire to serve the marginalized of our community. And so when I heard your story, it was very easy to identify it with it. Tell us how that came to be, what you did, and where it's gone since then.
You bet. I probably need to back up a few years back to the point where I started my business at the age of 30. I would tell you that during my 30s, I was pursuing success, holding on tightly to the things that Pete had accumulated. Okay. At the age of 40, we bought a failed bank. It was a mess. Long story short, um, I literally had to go get on my knees and beg to get out of a lawsuit, and God was faithful to me and let me out of that. And at that point in time, I really began to say, what is the purpose of business? Because I always thought it was just to maximize shareholder value, as Milton Friedman so eloquently stated and won a Nobel Prize on. Okay. And so at that point in time, I took a Crown ministry class talking about Larry Burkett. Howard Dayton and Larry got together. And my mentor was a great friend of Howard Dayton. So I took one of the first Crown classes. And if you remember, I think the first chapter is on God's part and the second chapter is on our part. It was when I was introduced to stewardship. So during the 90s, the next 10 years of my life, unfortunately, I thought stewardship meant financial generosity. So we just put the hammer down, made as much money as we could, and gave it away. 9/11 rolled around. Um, Black ink went to red ink, generosity ceased. Pete's function in life seemed to be no more. I said, God, why are you doing this? And I think he really taught me another lesson that it wasn't about success, wasn't about significance, holding on lightly so God could use him, but it was really about surrender, all in. Okay. So at the age of 50, and when right after 9/11, I said, okay, God, I'm going to try this deal one more time. And what does a business look like that is truly run by a steward? And at that point in time, we came up with this idea. The triple bottom line was popular in the 90s, people, profit, and planet. You're probably familiar with that. I liked that, kind of grasped onto it, but I thought it was missing a fourth P called principles. We're the principles to decide what you're going to do with your profit, your people, and your planet. And so we changed those three and we called it economic, social, and spiritual capital. Okay. And then we took the four values that I'd had, and we took those through. My quiet times were terrible, to be honest. So I said, God, you've got to, I've got to get fired up about the word again. So I simply took this triple bottom line, economic, social, and spiritual capital. I took my four values. Every morning when I picked up God's word, I said, show me something that would help me take these seven things and make them real in business. God's word just exploded in a day or two. And I began to write. And 20 years of writing actually wound up being, this thing. So I just started taking notes. And that was in 2001, 2002. And I began working on this. In 2005, we had a rapidly growing company that I couldn't hire enough entry-level labor. It was in a town of about 40,000 in Kansas. It did happen to have a prison in it, a state prison. I found out about a work release program where they would take inmates and ship them to our business. We'd work them during the day, and they'd take them back to prison at night. I did that for a month. I had 10 guys. It was terrific. I went back to the warden. I said, I want 10 more of those guys. They work hard and they're pretty good. He said, I don't have 10 more. I'm out of those guys. But if you can figure out how to move your business in behind the walls of my prison, I've got 1,200 guys ready to work. And I said, boy, this is perfect. And they'll uh, they'll show up on time every day. They'll come in uniform. I can work them hard and make them pay for their sins. I said, this is terrific. And so within 30 days, we'd moved part of our business in behind the walls of a maximum security prison. And I will tell you, it only took about 90 or 120 days in there. But yeah, I came to the realization that maybe the only difference between them and me is that they got caught. And so God really worked on me. I believe he put us in prison so that I could understand what real economic, social, and spiritual capital look like. Because a prison is a desert of human flourishing. It has none of those. And so we um, we wound up hiring guys, and I will, yeah. So that's how we got in the prison business. Today we employ about we're in two different prisons. We employ about 250 inmates total. Um, we're in two different prisons. It's been it's it's just fabulous. Anytime I get down on life, I just have to go to the prison and hang out with those guys and figure out what's going on, and it's been absolutely terrific.
Hey, let me take a minute and tell you about an urban ministry conference that we're hosting on April 25 and 26. Our City, Windsor, Signs of Change. You can go to the website ourcitywindsor.ca and get all the details. We have an amazing lineup of speakers and workshop presenters. We have a professional development session. Just a lot of great things, a lot of great music as well. And it would be great to come to Windsor and come to a conference where you can learn a lot more about community building. We've got some great practitioners in this city that you're going to want to learn from. and be able to network with. So come on down. I'm wondering the business that you have. It sounds like it's some kind of manufacturing. And is there? Did you say that it's just while they're in prison, or do they come work with you when they're released? How's that? What's that look like?
Yes. So um, we we um, we have two different businesses. One builds electrical assemblies, one builds industrial seating, and in two different prisons. One's a medium maximum security prison and one's a medium security prison. So when they get out, if we have room on the outside to employ them, we do, and we probably employ 12 or 15 of those men now on the outside. Most of them, because Hutchinson's a small town, don't parole to Hutchinson, so they go to Wichita or Kansas City or whatever. So what we've done is we've been able to develop a really great network of business owners who are sensitive to what we're doing. So I would say 98, 99% of the men that come out all get a good job.
Oh, that
And
what an investment.
well, and I will tell you one other thing. If you're an inmate for the state of Kansas and work for the state of Kansas in prison, they pay you $1 a day. We pay our guys $100 to $200 a day. We
Mhm.
pay them fair market value wages. And so most of our guys are coming out with 10, 15, 20,000. We've had some guys come out with 70, 80,000. So they have economic capital. And then we have loved them like we've loved ourselves, social capital. And then of course we do our best to introduce them to the Savior, and that's where the real impact happens.
What are some of the things that as you have had increasing opportunities to engage with men in prison, what are some things that you've learned about prison life? And there's obviously a lot of similarities once you get to know people on the other side of the bars, right?
Yes.
You hear there's some of their stories, and it's not always a beautiful story that got them there. But what's God teaching you and showing you about people through all this?
Yeah. Um, One is maybe the only difference between them and me is they got caught and
Yeah.
I didn't. Okay, so we're all sinners. There are some really evil people in prison and they need to be there and they need to be locked up probably for a long time. There are some people that are just bad
Hmm.
and I don't know why that is. Prison is there to break people, okay? And they break, and most people get broken in prison. It's a terrible place. It is a desert of human flourishing. There's no job, there's no friends, and there's not much Jesus, okay? So it is a desert of human flourishing. But what we've been able to do is create a little island of flourishing inside of the prison. And so um, we give them a good job. We try to follow the example of the Good Samaritan. And this is no offense to you pastors, but you know, it says the pastors, the priests and the Levite, they're the spiritual guys walk along the road. They walk around the guy. Okay.
Yeah, we had to get to a board meeting.
You got to get to board meeting. Exactly. Well, then a guy like me comes along, the faith-driven entrepreneur. Okay. And what did that guy do? He stopped and picked him up and took him to the hotel. So we believe that the spiritual guys were probably looking over at him and said, if he'd just get Jesus, everything would be great. It doesn't work that way. And so what the Good Samaritan figured out was you lead with economic capital, give them a good job, give them some material provisions. I mean, you can, we three things you need: economic, social, spiritual capital. You can have a lot of friends, you can have Jesus, but if you don't have food to eat, you are not flourishing.
Right.
Okay. So lead with economic capital. Give them a good job. Give them food to eat, whatever they need. Secondly, follow with social capital. Love them like you love yourself, and people will see that. When you do those two things, what we have found, the door to spiritual capital flies open. We we like to quote 1 Peter 3:15. Be prepared to give a reason for the hope that is in you. And then I forgot kind of how it goes, and do it with kindness and love or something like that. So you see, when we give them a good job and we love them like we love themselves, there will come a time in their lives where they will have a need to get an answer for their sinful nature, and we want them to know that we have that answer. So, um, yeah, these men are broken, but when you put them in an environment where you do those three things, oh my goodness, these men flourish like you. It's just amazing. I was in the prison a couple of months ago, and one of the residents, the inmates, came running up to him. He said, "Pete, you're not going to believe my mom's house burned down." I said, "That's terrible." And he goes, "Well, what's worse is she didn't have insurance."
Oh,
But he said, "You know what happened within 24 hours? My fellow inmates, which was about 100 of them, raised 12,500 bucks for his mom. I didn't tell those inmates to raise that money. On their own, in 24 hours, they came up with 12,500 bucks and gave it to this guy." And I can tell you story after story like that. So these men are, because they have a simple life, they understand what's important. Our inmate population, we have a generosity program where, as a business, if you work for us, we'll match whatever you give. Okay, and our inmates outgive our civilians almost 4 to 1.
I'm breathless.
Yeah.
So how do you decide, practical question, how do you decide which guys are going to come work for you inside? And I mean, obviously, if there's the handful that eventually work for you on the outside, but primarily inside, what's the filter there?
Yes. So in the prison system, they have a security ranking 1 through 4. If you're a 1 or a 2, you're a bad guy and you can't do anything. You're basically in your cell at least 12 hours a day and maybe 23 hours a day. Okay. If you're a classification 3 or 4, you can get out of your cell and come actually work in our business. Okay. So when we need help, we'll let the prison know. And, we'll say we could use a welder or a metal fabricator. So they're looking through who they have available to work and what skills they have. And if we need 2 or 3 people, they may give us 10 or 15. At that point in time, we'll get access to those men. And then we start the regular interview process, hiring process. So we make them fill out an application, we interview them. Part of the reason we do this is we're getting them prepared for when they get out as well. So we'll take them through that. We'll coach them through that. We'll hire these men and put them to work.
When you talk about, I'm fascinated by this. When you talk about pursuing excellence, after having listened to more of your story at different times, I understand your personal objective for that. How in the world do you translate that into the prison population and have them actually motivated to pursue excellence? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So that's a culture thing, Steve. If you In fact, I'm going to invite both of you to prison with me at some point in time. You can come to Wichita, Kansas. We'll go hang out for a half a day in
That
prison,
sounds good.
and and you'll be fired up, trust me. So if you went into our shop, you would see a triangle that happens to have 4 other triangles in it, and in the middle of it says honor God, and the 3 outside triangles say serve people, pursue excellence, steward capital. And on the outside of that is another triangle that says economic, social, and spiritual capital, a darker blue triangle. And we have that hanging on the wall. Every month we provide lunch to the inmates, and the warden has allowed us to bring in lunch from the outside. So I remember the first time we did this, There were 20 guys working for us, so we ordered 20 large pizzas and about, I don't know, we had 40, 50 cans of pop and a couple of bags of Snickers. Those 20 guys went through the whole shooting match. A guy said, I haven't had a piece of pizza in 25 years. It was, it was crazy. And so once a month, we entice them to listen to us by buying them lunch. And we literally they're standing in front of us. I'm standing up against the wall, or my son, or some of our other senior people, and behind us is this triangle. And we literally point up there and we say, "Let me tell you what it means to honor God," or "Let me tell you what it means to serve people." And we do this every month. We're talking about this. If you came in and walked up to most of our men on the floor, let's say the ones that had been there maybe a year or more, and said, "How does this business run?" They would turn right around, point to the triangle, and say, "We honor God, we serve people, blah, blah, blah." And you see, we're creating that culture inside there. So, um, principle number 3, pursue excellence. Excellence is a big, big deal to us, okay? And excellence is a big deal because it honors God and it inspires people. Okay. Um, Here is the deal for me. I think too often we think as excellence as a certain standard. So if you don't meet that standard, you're not excellent. Okay. Um, I don't think excellence is a standard. I think it's an attitude. We have a company that builds run-of-river hydroelectric projects in Honduras. Okay. It's back in the mountains. These people make $1,000 a year. They're the poorest of the poor in the world. When we're driving to our sites, we drive by excellent mud huts and not so excellent mud huts. You see where I'm going here?
Yep. What do you,
Excellence is doing the best you can where you are with what you have for the glory of God. Excellence is doing the best you can with what you have for the glory of God. Arrogance, which is very close to excellence, is doing the best you can where you are with what you have for the glory of yourself. The difference between excellence and arrogance is motivation. Is it for me in the center triangle, or is it to honor God? So excellence, I think, is an attitude, and it's doing the best you can where you are with what you have for the glory of God. So it doesn't matter whether you drive a Ford, you can drive a Ford and be excellent, or you can drive a Mercedes-Benz and be excellent.
it sounds to me that perfectionism can be a distortion of excellence.
Yes, I believe you're right.
Um,
And
oh,
and
yeah, go ahead.
and once again, it's motivation. Are you really doing it? Does God really care that you just pound away on this guy because he's off a little bit here or there? Uh, and so I just think that a lot of this whole thing with excellence is really about your motivation and where do you sit in the whole thing with God? Yeah.
Mm,
We here's how you get excellence. Okay. Here are the 3 things. We have this saying that we teach our inmates. Competent managers bring expertise, innovation, and discipline to a team effort. If you want to be excellent, so if you look on our little triangle, say pursue excellence, and if you look at the 3 sides of the triangle, it has 3 words. Expertise, you got to know what you're doing. You have to be innovative, which is a hard thing. I think expertise is a head thing, innovation is a hard thing, and discipline's a hand thing. So if you get those 3 things and get people to understand that, they can be excellent.
the parable of the stewards, right? The guy who is not pursuing excellence is burying his treasure, right?
Exactly.
Because he thinks I better not push myself because I could get in trouble.
Yes.
Um, I'm curious too about how your views on crime and punishment. It's always great to have armchair opinions, isn't it? When we can look at things from afar and have these, very passionate opinions about what people should do about this problem and that problem. But just talk to me a little bit about crime and punishment and over the years of involvement, how have maybe your views been changed?
Yeah, great question. And I'm still probably wrestling that dog to the ground. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, Raised a Christian, kind of from a reformed environment, hardworking family, conservative. I just always thought the death penalty was the way it was, you know. I will tell you now, there may be a there may be a place for the death penalty. I don't, to be honest, I don't know. I have changed my views on that because I've seen men. I had a young fella who murdered a fella at 17, was in for life, no parole. His name was Louis Gutierrez. In fact, if you want to go in and you can Google Deal Makers, a movie called Deal Makers. It's Louis' story. It's a 30-minute documentary. Louis was 17, murdered a guy, came to prison for life. We came to prison. Louis was one of our first inmates that we hired. I began to work for us. This was now 12 years ago. And about 90 days in to us being in prison and Louis working for us, I came to the realization that these men needed a vision bigger than what we had. So I came up with this idea, said, we're going to have the best prison in the United States. So I remember having one of our lunches, and I stood in front of the guys and I said, okay, guys, we need a vision, and here it is. We're going to have the best prison in the United States of America. They laughed me out of the place. They were slapping their hands, booing, laughing. That's an oxymoron. You can't believe it. It was bad. And I said, but no, guys, and then they said, well, how are you going to do that? And I said, we're going to have the best prison because my promise to you is I'm going to help you become the best person you can be. And all of a sudden, the laughter stopped and it got really silent. And I had 4 or 5 guys come up to me and said, I want to be the best person I can be. Louis was one of them. Louis went to work, worked for us for 10 years, wrote a manual on how to be the best prisoner in the prison. 40 pages, began to teach his fellow inmates. Guess what happened? He got a parole hearing because of that. I went to the parole hearing. He didn't get out. They left him in another 3 years. In 3 years, he got out. Louis was a phenomenal tattoo artist, phenomenal artist. Wanted to open a tattoo shop when he got out. Um, he he got out and he went to work for another outfit. He was tempted a time or two from some of his old buddies, and Louis held strong. Um, Today, he is very one of the most successful tattoo artists in the country, and he came to Christ, and he now runs a business called Redemption Inc. And uh, he's amazing. The impact he's having is amazing. Now, he was in for life. He wasn't up for murder. I mean, he was in for murder, but he didn't get a death sentence. So I don't know. Murder's a terrible thing.
Yeah.
But I will tell you it. There is redemption, and the problem with our penal system is we break them in, but we don't rehabilitate them. And they need economic, social, and spiritual rehabilitation.
These stories are so wonderful to share, to have the ability to share. You have such a unique experience uh, under your belt.
Let me tell you one more story.
Yeah, yeah.
Please.
Um, so 10 years ago, the warden at the prison said, he was a evangelical guy, Christian guy. He said, Pete, we have no church, no place for these guys to worship. And would you help me raise some money? And I've got a space. This is a 130-year-old prison. It's built around a rotunda. So you have a big building in the middle and you have cell blocks coming off of it. And everybody passes through the rotunda. There was a second story of the rotunda, 7 or 8 thousand square feet, had these massive Gothic windows, four massive Gothic windows in it that had been concrete blocked in. He walked me up there and he said, Pete, if we could open these windows up, create a church up here, a spiritual worship center. It was up high, and most men never get up that high. When you go in that prison, all you see is stone walls. You never see trees, the sun, the real sunset, etc. But up in that chapel, you could see all of this. So it was supposed to take 4 years and 400, or it was supposed to take 2 years and $400,000. It took 10 years and 1.2 million, but we got a church built in the top of this um, prison. Now, one guy that worked for me was the head of a gang in prison, and he had come to Christ. He had gone to work for us. He's cleaned up. He came to work for us, came to Christ with us. We started a seminary in the prison. It's a 3-year seminary. So we've had 50 men go through this seminary. These guys are going back behind the walls, revolutionizing the prison because they know how to lead. They know how to teach the word. They're awesome. Okay. And so this guy came to Christ, says, I want to go to seminary. He goes to prison or seminary, graduates from seminary. He's making $50,000 a year with us. He says, Pete, I need to leave my job and I want to go up in that new church that was built. This was a year or two ago. And I want to be the full-time pastor teacher up there. And that happened. I was in the prison 2 weeks ago. I took 10 businessmen up there. We walked in and there was Markel teaching 60 men Mondays through Saturdays for 7 hours a day, how to be a good person and a Jesus follower. And guess who was teaching beside him? It was his opposing gang leader in MS-13 that was led to Christ by Markel. And the way he did that was 2 years ago, every time he saw the MS-13 guy, he went over, hugged him and said, I love you, and walked off. He did that for about 4 or 5 months, and the MS-13 guy finally grabbed him and said, what's the deal with you? This is crazy. And Markel led him to Christ. Those two guys now negotiate gang issues inside of the prison. The power of Christ, guys, is crazy.
You don't have to stop. I know you got more stories.
We'll save that for another day. Do you see this call right here?
Yeah.
That's from an inmate in prison who is calling me to report out on his
Don't
monthly.
show his number.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
he's calling you to report on work.
For his monthly update.
Wow.
I sponsor him as a pastor in church. He went through our seminary.
Wow.
So obviously, this has had a tremendous impact on you spiritually, Pete. You couldn't possibly be part of this without some sort of transformation. Tell us what's happened with you in your spiritual life as a result of you going into the prison in an endeavor to serve others.
Yeah. So I had this idea of stewardship, that started in the early 90s, and it got refined over time, and God really showed me what that was. Okay. And it's really taking this economic, social, and spiritual things that he's given us. By the way, we come up with this economic, social, spiritual capital out of Genesis 2:15 through 18. Verse 15 says, I put man in the garden to work. If you're going to work, you're going to have material provision, economic capital. Verse 18, not good for man to be alone. You need deep, authentic relationships, social capital. Verse 16, 17, don't eat the fruit of that tree. It's the first time God gave us a moral code, spiritual capital to live life by. So I think in those four verses, it talks about economic, social, and spiritual capital, as it were. And so um, a couple of things have happened. I've realized that being an entrepreneur, money could be my greatest downfall. Okay, probably is. And so by going into that prison and seeing a desert of human flourishing, one of the things I did 25 years ago is Deb and I sat down, we said we're going to cap our lifestyle. So we've had the same pay and we get a inflationary raise on it every year. But what happens is while my lifestyle has been capped, what's happened to our businesses has gone up. So what you have is this more discretionary dollars to truly steward. And without being in that prison and without seeing the real difficult place that widows, orphans, the poor, and inmates are living in, I would not have had the sense, I don't think, to just love people like I should love them. I'm a transactional guy, you know. I, you know, you you do this and this for me, I'll pay you that. It's easy for me to be transactional. And that's great for systems, but when you want to deal with the culture in your business, then it's got to be transformational, and that's all about relationships. And God has really used that prison and the relationships with those men to change me.
That's why I have a great admiration for both you and Kevin. Um, and I've been a part of it to some extent through New Song Church. I have always described to other people who don't know Kevin that he has the unique ability to love the unlovable. And it has been such an honor just to watch that happen in the most profound ways. And it sounds like you've kind of been dragged through that same experience.
I didn't choose it, but I thank God for it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Go
As
ahead, Steve.
as an extension of that, um, you've created lots of business along the way. You've been successful financially. You had this endeavor to give away as much as you can. Now you've described that you've capped your lifestyle, but you're taking this a step farther. And you don't necessarily have to get into the details about it, but maybe you can just touch on sort of where you see it going from here and how you may have this ability to translate this or to set the model for others to potentially do when we contemplate the reality that God owns everything.
Yeah. Um, I stepped out of our businesses 6 years ago and transferred the stewardship of those to my son. And I began coaching really young business guys. And pretty quickly I realized they needed, we needed a system to take them through so they could understand how do you create economic, social, and spiritual capital in business? That sounds crazy. How do we do that? So I hired an assistant. We spent 3 years. And so we launched a new business a couple of years ago, and we really help businesses uh, run a virtuous, purpose-driven, Christ-centered business. How to do that and to have real impact. So that's been really fun. And I will tell you, Steve, in 2001, when I had come through this very tumultuous time, I realized that money was a problem for me. So I felt the only way that I could be a true steward was to legalize that somehow. So I worked with National Christian Foundation and others and tried to figure literally out how to get my business away. There was we ran down a bunch of roads, but at the end of the day, it didn't work very well. And then a couple of years ago, I was reading in the Wall Street Journal where Patagonia had given their business away. Maybe you've read about that. And as I began to really study that, Patagonia was very creative, and they imported a new kind of trust from Europe to the United States called the Perpetual Purpose Trust. And so we've been working on that for the last couple of years. So I am really fired up about helping businesses understand kind of the software of how do you create or an operating system, how do you really create these businesses that make a difference, and then help them understand that instead of selling to private equity or doing something that's going to destroy everything that you've worked for 40 years to do, how can we take what you've done, shove that over into a perpetual trust, and hopefully have that business run for another 100, 200 years, glorifying God, creating economic, social, and spiritual capital. So that's what I'm dedicated to. I will tell you, I'm 73. I've never been more focused, more fired up than I am today. Um, my my life verse up until 3 years ago was Psalm 78, 72. It's talking about David. So he fed them according to the integrity of his heart and guided them with the skillfulness of his hands. By the way, that verse has four values in it. So he fed them, served people with the integrity of his heart, honor God, and guided them, um, stewarded them with skillfulness of hands, excellence. Uh, but as I read that, I felt God calling me out of this day-to-day grind, and I really felt called to, to pass it on, as it were. So I continued to plow through the Psalms, and I came across Psalm 71:18. Now, don't laugh when I tell you this one, but it says, "Even when I am old and gray, O Lord, did not forsake me until I've declared your power to the next generation, your might to all are to come." I just read that and I said, that's who I am.
That's
Okay. Apparently, you're nowhere near old and gray yet.
no, no. It's a.
We're going to get with it. We're going to stay with it.
I'm sure you've probably, Peter, you might have heard there's some sociological studies that show a man's greatest decade of influence and success is from what was it, from 60 to 70, and the second greatest season or decade is from 70 to 80. So so we're different ages here, but we're all in our prime. And
Exactly.
when we were kids, man, this was like old man stuff, and no way, we're not going there.
That's right. You got it.
Long as I have strength, I'm gonna honor him. I'm gonna serve him.
You got
Yeah.
it.
Well, Peter and Steve, it's been great to have this conversation, and send me some links that I can include in our show notes for any of the organizations that you're involved in that we mentioned, as well as the books. And I just leaving today. It is Friday when we're recording, and I'm going to be going home for supper. But I'm going home charged up because I've been listening to Jesus in this last hour or so, and isn't he great, eh?
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Got it.
Well, thank you guys, and
Thank you so much. And Steve, again, thanks for the connection. And Kevin, thank you for granting me some time.
That was an inspiring conversation with Peter Ochs, and I'm looking forward to our next episode. Harold Gutierrez is going to be our next guest, and we're going to be talking about DEI and what it means to be a glocal That's GLOCAL, Glocal Church. Harold works in the BC District of Pentecostal Assemblies, and he's the cultural language coordinator as well as Aboriginal ministries in the BC Yukon District. The guy is doing some incredible work in his studies, and we've got a lot to learn. So come on back for our next episode. And until then, I'm Kevin Rogers, the host of Sidewalk Skyline Podcast.
Studio 61.